The Wake Up, from Claire. I hope this finds you both well in the hangover of Halloween. I don't even know where this next story fits into the world of the paranormal. I've experienced everything from ghosts to shadow people, sleep paralysis and some other strange phenomena. But this story doesn't seem to stick to any of those categories well enough. A little background. My son and I moved to our home nearly 4 years ago. This is the longest I have ever lived in one place since I moved out of home. It was the first home that I could sense that the energy was perfect for us, and we felt at home from the moment we set foot in it. For the last 3 years, my son, who's now 11, has shared my bed due to separation anxiety. We've worked so hard over the past few months to get him back to his own bed, and we've been having success over the last few weeks of him sleeping in that bed for most of the night. Often, because I'm a light sleeper, I'll hear him walk down the hall, then feel him come into the bed where he crashes back to sleep straight away. This last week, he's gone through the night in his own bed a few times, so as to say it's been luxurious to claim my whole bed to myself has been an understatement. Last night, he stayed at his dad's house. This morning, I heard him come down the hall and felt the weight of him get into the bed with me. Though I wanted to stay sleepy, I knew that this morning was Thursday, and he shouldn't be there. I put my hand to his shoulders as he leaned over to me, whispering my name in a rush. "Mum! Mum! Mum!" The panic rose hard and fast as I raced out of that sleepy but waking stage. I could feel two very real sensations. His breath on my face, and I could even smell the morning smell of it, and the skin over his shoulder and collarbone area pressurizing against my hand where I was holding him back. He was well and truly invading my personal space, a sensation I hate when he gets too close to me when he shares my bed. As soon as I could force out a rasped "yes" in response to his urgency, everything disappeared, including the weight off the bed. I picked up my phone to see the time was just after 5 a.m, which wasn't an uncommon time for us to wake up. And our cats then came into the room and made themselves at home on my bed. I know a quick counter-argument would be to say that I heard the cats come into the room. But there's a huge difference to the sound and feel of 2 3 to 4 kilogram cats with sharp claws, tip-tapping over tiles and laminate floors, at their own individual pace, to the sound of a 35 kilogram child thudding heavy-footed down a hallway. The other strange factor in all of this is that the cats are always in my room overnight, unless they go to use their litter trays. They tend to nestle like my personal guards at the foot of the bed, crawling up to me at around 5 a.m. because they're ready for affection and food. Where were they, and why did they leave my room, only returning once this event was over? That's what puzzles me about the whole thing. Did they sense something that made them leave? So many questions, but of all of my experiences, this is the one that makes zero sense to me. Any insight or ideas would be welcome. Thank you again for your efforts. The Ghost Story Guys is a great show.
Well, thank you, Claire. And that's, again, it's another one of these stories. It's almost like a Vartiger, but obviously not quite, because Vartiger is kind of someone coming home. But I do wonder about that. Is it just a function of our sleeping brain that makes us think that this thing is happening? But then how would you explain the pressure on the bed? And the breath. And the breath. Yeah. It actually makes me think of something that Teresa told me when our listener Teresa, when I met her for coffee here a couple weeks ago. She was saying that she had and I won't get into the whole story, but when she was younger, she had this experience where her and her brother were, I think they were sharing a bed, and they felt like a pressure, something climb on the bed, and then they actually both observed the mattress in front of their faces depress, like there was something there. And I don't know that I've ever actually heard of someone actually seeing the depression happen. You know, we've talked about people feeling pressure on the bed, but I think that might have been the first time I'd actually heard someone say, like, no, I saw what looked like pressure pushing down something where there was nothing there.
Have I not told you about the time I saw my auntie's ghost stroking the dog's belly at their pub?
Yes. Oh, of course. Yeah. No, definitely.
That was sat on the bed. You could see the indentation where it was sat. And as I was watching it, it filled back up as though it had got off the bed because it realised I was there.
I forgot about that because I remember because you saw like the stroking of the fur, correct?
Yeah. Fred was being very attentive.
Yeah. That's the part I remember is the stroking of the fur. I forgot about the impressions in the bed.
Yeah. It was Tina the Labrador, that was having her tummy tickled.
Oh man, no, that's really cool. It's funny, she mentions a Halloween hangover, and I was talking to Brandon about this, Brandon Scheck-Snyder. So you and I don't do anything additional for Halloween for as far as the shows go, we don't put out any additional content. And, Brandon was asking, like, what do you guys do? And I just, and you and I were talking about this. There's so much more shit going on at Halloween now than there ever used to be. Pretty much every show, even shows that are not paranormally themed, kind of do a ghost thing for Halloween. And so I sort of started thinking a couple of years ago, really, I was like, no, this isn't worth it. It's not worth the additional hassle of putting out new material or like additional material, because it used to be that Halloween was kind of like our Christmas, and our numbers would spike like they wouldn't any other month. And that really hasn't been true the last few years. We kind of see a much more like not generalized, but like more average numbers throughout the year. It's not like Halloween isn't the focus point it used to be. We're kind of spread out more over the year now.
Yeah. I think it is one of those things that obviously it seems to push its way into the mainstream more and more every year, especially over here. We've had situations, I remember 30 years ago, if Halloween fell on a Sunday, nobody'd show anything remotely spooky.
Really? Interesting. It's like not on television, you mean?
On terrestrial television, yeah.
Right.
The main channels wouldn't show anything at all. Even Channel 4 wouldn't do it, which is surprising for them in those days. They tend to do anything to thumb their nose at the establishment.
Right.
So it's not something. But I know, like you say, it's not a Voyager, but maybe it could have been some kind of astral projection.
Yeah, that could be. I'd be interested to know whether or not the kid had a dream about that.
He could be dreaming about being at home with his mum, and for him, it was such a powerful. And maybe because of what we're told in the build-up about separation anxiety, that maybe that manifested in some form of astral projection to be with his mum.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I was doing the Big Blitz, when I was writing Strange. I read, a shitload of paranormal books, and there were two I read, and they both referenced the same case, but one was coming at it from a more skeptical standpoint. They was sort of examining past life, or not past life, but like visions of people returning to give wisdom. And they gave this example of a mariner. And they said, well, this mariner was on the sea, and like things were really, really bad. And he dreamed of his wife, or he not dreamed, but like his wife was there with him. And he said, well, this gave me comfort. And they're like, oh, well, that's, clearly that's your brain putting this thing there to feel better. So you sort of give you some comfort as you potentially could be dying. But what was interesting is they didn't pursue it any further than that. They just sort of said, well, this is, clearly this is not real. But they didn't investigate much more than that. Like they didn't talk to the wife or anything like that. And what I found is interesting is another book I'd read had covered the same case, but there was an additional detail that the more skeptical book omitted, which is that same night, the wife dreamed about being on board the ship and comforting him during bad weather. And I wish I could remember the name of that case or the book. I think I've still got it on my shelf at home in Victoria, but yeah. And so you do wonder if it's possible there's some kind of intense connection between people and that can happen.
I would imagine there's lots of those kinds of stories, but they're often disregarded because they don't fall into the parameters of what you'd call a crisis apparition.
Yeah, that's fair. So for folks who don't know, could you tell them what a crisis apparition is?
Yeah, essentially, people will claim to be visited by a relative or a loved one or someone that means a lot to them in a situation where they know that person can't be there because they're in a foreign country, or they're in hospital ill, or whatever, but often they see this person and then, as is the usual, they receive a telegram or a letter or a telephone call to tell them that that particular person that they thought they'd encountered had actually passed away at the particular time that they were visited.
Right. And there's a really great book, and I've mentioned it a million times in the show, but John Geiger's The Third Man Factor that details a lot of interactions with crisis. With what at the time he thought himself were just hallucinations. He thought they were a sort of a deep-seated survival mechanism. But by the time he got around to his next book, if I recall, like Geiger, his perspective had really shifted.
Yeah. It's a very interesting phenomenon, that.
Yeah. I've never experienced anything like it. And I tell you, man, there have been dark times in my life where I've like desperately wished for something like that, just something to pull me out of the darkness. And it's never happened. But I'm glad to know there are some people at least who've been able to have that and sort of have that, what's the word I'm looking for? That, not relief exactly, but that comfort, I guess.
Definitely.
So thank you again, Claire.